Uh, got it. Good. So I told Josh a little earlier that I'm a little bit nervous about this. Should I be nervous? You guys gonna give me a hard time? No, I guess not, because you're all muted, right? Anyway, I really hope that this is of great value for you. And, I'm very far removed from your age, but I do remember some of the things back from when I was about your age, and it was a little bit of a challenge, I know. So let me get my screen set up here. Did I do it right? Can you see my screen?
Yes, we can.
Oh, you should be seeing where is God? Is that right? Is that what you see? So
Yes.
it's a challenging topic, right? Where is God? I know that the topic is not exactly where is God. It's a little bit different from that. But if you don't believe in God, then it's pretty tough to have a relationship with him, right? Or her. So I thought that this would be a really powerful way, I hope, to introduce you and all of us to discuss the possibility of our relationship with God. So let's just begin with a reading. You do not keep your most precious things in a place where people can just see and touch them. You secure them in a place where no one can steal them. If you had a most precious, prized, and unique treasure, you would secure it where no one could take it. You would keep it in the deepest part of your heart, the place to which you alone had access. Your heart is the only place where you can meet God one-on-one. I want to read that sentence one more time. Your heart is the only place where you can meet God one-on-one. Your heart. God, too, does not want to meet you in an exposed place. He seeks a unique place where he can see and meet you as an individual with unique character, thinking, and feeling. That is the reason God made the conscience incorporeal. So your conscience is where you feel and experience God. And that's from the Chung Sung Jung. And if any of you want to research it, there is the link or the location. So where is God? I want to start with a poll, and I don't know if Josh has got it set up yet, but
I do.
Oh, good. Okay, so could you show the poll? And I want this will be anonymous, so that you don't have to worry about people seeing your result. But I want to get an idea of how many of you really believe in God, and if you don't, that's okay, and I'll explain that in a minute. Maybe God exists, maybe he doesn't, and maybe you're not just sure who is God anyway. Well, so when I was younger, my parents they were good and moral people, and at some point they took me to a Christian church, and I became a good Christian. And then later on, I rejected Christianity, I rejected God. There were some reasons why I really could not believe in God. So maybe we can see the results of the poll right now, Josh, if that's okay. Did everybody get a chance to vote?
There's a few people who didn't, but majority voted.
Yeah, just take another minute or so, a few seconds, and vote. And if you're not sure, that's okay. Or if you completely reject God, I think that's okay at this point. I hope that doesn't last long, but anyway. So go ahead and close it, Josh, and let's have a look at what most of us believe. So 85% believe in God. 20% of you maybe. Okay, well, that's good. I really did expect some no's. I don't believe in God, but maybe is perhaps the same. So, okay, so that being the case, I just want to share a little bit about my experience. As I mentioned, I grew up in a moral, ethical family. My parents served the community. My mother was a nurse in a small community, and anytime anybody got sick or had any medical issues, they'd call her and she'd rush over and take care of them, whatever. Anyway, so at some point they realized that I probably should learn a little bit about God and religion and so forth. Even though I'd gone to Sunday school for 11 years, I didn't really learn very much about Christianity or anything. So I became a Christian, and for a year or two in my mid-teens, I was pretty dedicated to Christianity, to living a good and moral life and really understanding God. And then the pastor, who I had a deep respect for and a good relationship with, he was killed in a car accident. So that really changed my attitude. I thought, how can God allow that to happen? If there's a God, how could that possibly be? So I ultimately became an atheist. And I mean, I did not believe in God. I tried to find him in various Christian churches and so forth, but the questions that I had were just, they weren't really answered. You know, the response typically was, well, you just have to have faith. Nobody really understands that. They taught about the Messiah coming on the clouds and he's going to fix everything and make the world, you know, an ideal place. But in the meantime, around the world, there were severe plagues where people were starving, literally starving to death. And today it's not a lot different because that I know that still exists. But when I met the divine principle, I realized that each one of us as individuals have responsibility. And that gave me a lot of hope and helped me to understand that I don't just have to have faith. Faith is important, but I can't just rely on faith to understand how I should live my life. So that really helped me a lot. But during this time, my many years in the church, in the beginning, I really struggled to know how deep is my faith, how strong is my faith. And there was a real lot of persecution, intense persecution at that time. And so ultimately, at some point, I was kidnapped. My brother kidnapped me because he thought that, and he had been convinced by some professional, what they call deprogrammers, that I was brainwashed and I had to be kidnapped and taken out of that. I had to be what they called deprogrammed. So I spent quite a lot of time trying to convince them that I wasn't brainwashed, that I had made a choice, and this is what I wanted to do. They wouldn't believe me, so I eventually, when I had a chance, I took off, disappeared. Then they kidnapped me a second time. So anyway, so that really tested my faith, and I realized, okay, yep, I do have a deep faith and a deep understanding of the divine principle. And it was understanding the principle that really helped me, but also recognizing and beginning to believe that God loved me as an individual, even though, you know, I was what Christians call a sinner. I had done some pretty terrible things. I had gotten a little bit into drugs and alcohol and those kinds of things. And you know, I hadn't lived a really moral life while I was what I considered to be an atheist. But I realized, especially when I was matched and then blessed to my wife, that God sent the true parents, and I'm not going to talk about true parents. You will hear more about that later, and you are familiar with them, but they brought the divine principle, and that was a breath of fresh air for me. That really, really changed. And when I met the church, I was 30 years old already. So I was almost old enough to be your father at that time, most of you anyway. So I had lived a good number of years, and I had some real deep questions about the meaning of life and the value of life and so forth. And so the divine principle really, really helped me a lot. And when we look around right now, you can see that the world is still a mess. It's a horrible mess. It's probably worse now than it ever has been. There's so much confusion, so much chaos. And you guys are kind of in the middle. You know, your parents sacrificed a lot to join the movement. They made the choice to join, and they struggled through a lot of challenges. And I really want to encourage you to ask them about that time, how they met the church, and you know, tell you the story about their lives in the movement, because they went through some really intense difficulties. But you guys are kind of in a middle position. You're surrounded by chaos and corruption and so much confusion and temptation. It's really a challenging time for all of you. I really believe that, So I really hope that you will find what I did in the divine principle. And if God is a maybe for you, I really want you to study the divine principle. Without the divine principle, I would have no hope. I look at my brothers now, I look at the world around me, and it's just confusing. I can't believe how people survive with so much chaos and confusion and misunderstanding. But the principle is really liberating. So the question here is, what is perfection? Well, I'm not going to answer that. I'm not sure that there is, but I can tell you that when you have reached maturity or perfection, it doesn't mean you're not going to fall down and break your arm. Those kinds of things are still going to happen. You're still going to have disagreements with your parents and your spouse and your children when you become a parent. So that's not what perfection is, but perfection is the connection of heart that you have to God. So what in the quote that I read a little earlier, perfection is a level of conscience where you can connect with God and really understand from God's point of view how to live your life. So, and I know that's kind of a vague answer, but it's important, I think, that you study that and really understand what it means for you as an individual. So one of the very, very important things about the divine principle is that everything needs to go through a growth period. This is really fundamental, and it was very revolutionary for me to understand that. This includes your relationships with your parents, your siblings, your friends, your relationship with God as well. It needs to grow. And prayer, when you pray, if you pray, it needs to grow and develop. So I want to encourage you to be really patient with yourself. Some days will be very difficult. Some days you will feel perhaps depressed or really down on yourself, critical, and of your parents too, and of the church. And I know a lot of you maybe don't feel that the movement, the church as we refer to it, is a good place to be. And that's okay. It's good to challenge it and really understand your faith for you. What does it mean to you? What does the divine principle mean to you as an individual? So one of the things that you may not have thought about is that God needs to grow as well. Phew. Oh, really? God needs to grow. Interesting. If you think about it, if God is our parent, he, she, our heavenly parent, cannot be a parent without children. And according to the divine principle, up until now, God really hasn't had children that he can connect in heart to. So when we become filial sons and daughters, connect through our heart, through our conscience to God, then that gives him the opportunity to become a parent. And even parents need to grow. You may have noticed your parents aren't perfect. We're all working on it, but we all need to grow. And so I want to make some suggestions that I hope can be helpful to build your relationship with God. First of all, find joy in what you do. God doesn't mean for us to suffer and be miserable and just live a life of trauma, and he really needs us to be filled with joy. And I know in the world today, and some of the experiences that you are going through in your life, that's not always easy. In fact, maybe it isn't easy very often, but it is important. God really wants you to feel joy in your life and feel fulfilled in your life. So find a way to serve others. And if you're down and depressed, and feeling really sad or lonely or guilty, whatever you feel, if it's not a good and joyful time for you, I recommend that you go out and clean the streets, or go to a soup kitchen, or find some way to volunteer and make an offering, because that will really help you to live the principle. Follow your conscience in everything you do. Be wise in your choices, and make constructive choices. Be really careful to stay away from drugs and alcohol and pornography. those, already, you hear it all the time. I'm not going to lecture you on that. You know already that it's really important to just be wise in the choices that you make. And if you have issues with those things, find some help. And in your life, be consistent. If you're able to set goals and do that, that's great. I'm not really good at setting goals, quite frankly. Anyway, if you do, start with small ones and just begin from there. But try to be consistent in your life. Really be patient with yourself. There will be challenges, of course, that you can't even anticipate at this point. But be patient with yourself and step by step try to work through those challenges that you face. Find a joy in what you do, and some things that you might appreciate are, walking in nature or swimming or being outdoors in creation, singing. A lot of you I know are very, very, very musical, and that's really good. So play music, play some good games, interactive. Be careful with the video games, of course. Some things can be addictive and therefore then maybe aren't so positive. But joy is really important in your life. So for those of you who are not sure about the divine principle, I really, really encourage you to study it. Check it out, critique it. Don't just accept it. You need to establish your own faith. You need to understand what it is that you believe and what it is that you just can't accept. And so I encourage you to read and study the divine principle. If it isn't true, it's worthless, right? If the divine principle is not true, it's not worth following. But before you reject it, be really, really careful to understand it. So I think that it's important to talk to people who do understand the divine principle, certainly more deeply than me. I don't have that deep and intellectual understanding of it, but I really encourage you to study it really carefully. So here is a way, believe it or not, that you can come closer to God by improving your relationship with your parents. So wherever it's at, it can always be improved. I know. So what I would like to suggest is that you try to understand them from their point of view. What is it that they're dealing with? And one of the things that I can absolutely promise you is they want what's best for you, even though you may not feel that or understand or believe that or trust that in the moment. They really do. Your parents really want what's best for you. They will make mistakes, like all of us. We all make mistakes, and it may hurt you or it may hurt your relationship. But try to be patient with them. And I mentioned earlier that they have a different course from you. They chose to join our movement. Some of your parents might be blessed children who were born into the movement, but they no doubt have evaluated the principle and decided that this is the life that they believe is valid and true, that they want to follow. So your parents met the church, most of you, and went through a challenging course, very challenging course. And I really encourage you to ask them about that. And that will give you the opportunity to just listen to them. Don't talk, just listen. Ask them, how did you join the church? What kind of difficulties did you go through? And really try to understand where they're coming from by doing that. They might be surprised that you ask them those questions, but I'm sure that they'll be really gratified that you're interested and curious. So whatever your relationship with your parents is, try to listen, really try to listen. And then once you're able to do that, you can say to them, okay, I'm really grateful that you've been telling me all of this stuff. Now I would really like to share what I'm thinking and what I'm feeling. So ask them to listen to you. And that will give you the chance to express where you're at and what you're feeling. And be wise, but work to build a relationship of trust with them. So always I want to encourage you to have a healthy, positive attitude about life. and especially living a conscientious life, you might throw up your hands and say, it's just not worth it. I'm just going to go out and drink and have a good time. I really encourage you to think very deeply and carefully about that. I know that your lives are really challenging in so many ways, but if the principle is true, it's really important to live a principled life. And in the future, you won't regret it. You won't regret it. I know that. So when you're challenged, never give up, pursue it. And of course, as long as it's a righteous thing or a good thing, something positive that's going to benefit you or society in the long run, don't give up. So that's basically what I want to leave you with. I do have a couple of more slides that I just want to bring up. And if you want to take a screenshot, or if you want this PowerPoint, I can send it to you. This is from something introducing the divine principle, and it basically says about our core principles. It introduces what Father Moon brought to humanity. So the first great principle is that God is alive, and God is the parent of humankind. The second is that God's nature is true love. He wants to pour unlimited true love into the hearts of his children. And as a parent, I can tell you that is absolutely the case of parents. That is the parent's heart. The third great principle is that God, the invisible parent, tries to save the world through his substantial expression on the earth, the true parents. So I really want you to challenge all of this and to do the research. And here are some links that, if you're not familiar with them, these can provide some information on the principle. And the first one by Reverend Compton, letsstudydp.com. It's really intriguing. He was an atheist like me. I can kind of very much identify with him, but he was studying at Berkeley College in Berkeley, California. And he saw the Christians out witnessing and, felt they weren't doing very much, but the atheists, or those people who were environmentalists, or those people who were activists, were really promoting and doing things for society. And so he felt, wow, that's the way to go. And then somehow he met the divine principle and understood that the Christians aren't wrong, the environmentalists and even the communists aren't wrong. We all need to contribute and take responsibility for our world and for ourselves and for what we do. Anyway, I think you'll find it intriguing. So letsstudydp.com and dplife.info you may be aware of, and the divine principle is there as well. So I want to leave you with that. And if there are any questions, I'd be very happy to discuss them. If you have anything else that you'd like to bring up that I might be able to help with, I'd very much like to do that. So thank you all. Thank you for listening. I hope that wasn't too boring. I really appreciate
have
sharing with you.
13 minutes if you have anything else you'd like to do with the group.
Any questions? Does anybody have any questions or comments or experiences that you may like to share? Okay. I think, you may be curious about when I was kidnapped. It was a pretty dramatic experience. I was 35 years old. I was living in Calgary. I had a business, and we had really, Petro-Canada was one of our, I don't know if you know Manulife, Manufacturers Life. Those were customers that we have. I mean, I owned a house and I owned the business in Calgary. And then I was kidnapped because they thought I was brainwashed, 35 years old. So I guess I'm still brainwashed. I don't know. Anyway, that really solidified my faith. It made it really, really clear to me that there is a very strong opposition to what I believed was true and that people, even family, would go to no ends to save or to to I don't know what, reconvert or to deprogram. That's what they were trying to do to me. Anyway, it was a very intense experience, and since that time, God has really blessed me. I had to escape twice from them, and in some ways it was by trickery. I couldn't convince them that I was sane and making rational decisions and choices, even though I was running this business, which was very, very profitable. And anyway, and not only that, but at that time, the police were instrumental in having me kidnapped. So, it was a pretty challenging time. And some of your parents have gone through similar experiences. They may not have been kidnapped, but they've been through really strong challenges to their faith. And so that's why I would really want to encourage you to talk to them, ask them about when they joined the movement and how they joined and why. And why did they stick it out all these years? So I think that will help you to build or rebuild or continue to grow your relationship with your parents, because and they may not just spontaneously share those things with you, but if you ask, I'm sure they'll be very happy to talk about it. So one of the questions that I suggested for the breakouts is, how is your relationship with your parents? So maybe you can just take a minute to think about that. How is your relationship with your parents, and how can you improve your relationship with your parents? Because that is, if your relationship with your parents is strong and healthy, and you can have free give and take, and then your relationship with God is very likely to be the same. Very likely you have and can build a strong relationship with God much easier. So when we're young, when we're children, God, our parents represent God, right? We look to them and trust them. And then as we grow older, we realize, gee, our parents really don't know everything, and they really do make mistakes. And so if you can build a relationship with them of love and trust, then it's a really good foundation for you to build a relationship with God. So I hope those of you who said maybe you believe in God, that you'll really research, study the divine principle. Evolution is one of the things that scientists and a lot of people accept as being true. Evolution is not, yes, okay, evolution from God's point of view. God, I believe, evolved the creation and so on and so forth, but it didn't just happen automatically. It just is not logical that evolution was just an automatic thing without some input. It just does not make sense. And one of our brothers, who is a doctorate in something or other, has done a lot of research on evolution as it's taught in colleges and universities, and shows very, very clearly that it just cannot be true. It's just not reasonable and logical. So that's another area that you could also research. And if you want information about that, I'll find his email information and you can reach out to him.
Awesome.
Okay.
Would you like us to do, we can put some reflection music and we can all do a little bit of reflection on your breakout questions. How about that?
That'd be great.
All right. So everyone, we're going to do 5 minutes, around 5 minutes of reflection. So I recommend getting a notepad out. You can, or however you like to reflect. And you can use the chat to message Uncle John directly if you have any questions or anything. So let's put some music on now. And you can do any kind of thinking that works best. Sasha, are you sharing sound? No, you're not. Perfect.